I'm Janet LaRue Buck. I was born in Alberta in 1935, and I was born in the house where I live now. My grandparents were a doctor and a nurse, and they had the first hospital in Benzie County in this house. And so I was fortunate enough to be born here, delivered by my grandparents. And my grandparents delivered many babies in their lifetime. Over 3,500 babies in Benzie County and Leelanau County. When my grandfather died, there were, in 1949, there were about $100,000 in outstanding debt to him. My grandmother when she got here from Norway, she had to go to work because they needed money to help support the family at that time. So she went to work for a lumber baron by the name of Lawrence Crane, and he was said to have had the largest lumber mill in the world at that time. She went to nurses training. She was in the first real nurses training class at the University of Michigan, and at that time it was only a 2-year course, so she graduated in 1894. My grandmother was considered the dean of nurses for the state of Michigan for many years because she was the oldest graduate of the University of Michigan Nurses Training School. And my grandfather, LaRue, was born in Empire, Michigan, and his parents, his father was the first white settler on the Leelanau Peninsula. But my grandfather and my grandmother had their practice in this house, and they had their office in the front parlor. And they had, sometimes this was the consultation room there, this other formal parlor. And then they also had a bench out in the hallway, and then there were sliding doors. The doors now just open, but they were sliding doors. And I've had people tell me that they used to sit out on that bench waiting for those sliding doors to open and being called into the office to be examined by my grandparents. My grandfather had an examination couch. I have a similar one in the medical museum. My grandparents worked 24/7. I don't ever remember a Thanksgiving dinner when we weren't interrupted by a phone call that somebody had a turkey bone stuck in their throat or something. That we used to have a big table and all the family here. My grandfather would have to go out on a house call someplace. They often went out to homes to deliver babies. I used to go with my grandfather on house calls. He made house calls all the time, and so did my grandmother. I remember he would have to go and cut people's bunions and toenails and things like that. During the Spanish flu pandemic, my grandfather would be out in his horse and carriage or horse and sleigh, because they didn't have a car yet then in 1918, going to take care of patients all over Benzie and Leelanau counties. He still had a lot of patients in Leelanau County because he'd had a practice there early on in Empire. And he would be in his horse and carriage or horse and sleigh for 2 weeks at a time, never sleeping in a bed, while he was out on the road taking care of all these people who were sick from the Spanish flu. And my grandmother, they had 3 young children, she stayed here and took care of the patients who came to the door. So that was very early on when they had this house that the Spanish flu came. They were very dedicated people. Even after he died, there were many people who came to this house to have my grandmother help them. And not only that, but there had been so many people, especially during the Depression of the 1930s, when people had no money, who couldn't pay my grandparents. And that was why there was so much money outstanding on their books when my grandfather died. Of course, my grandparents never tried to collect that money.